The water was still running when she said it. "If you want to come visit me, you'll wash the dishes first." Ka didn't laugh. She didn't even look up from her phone. She just dropped it there like it was a normal thing to say to someone standing at the sink with wrinkled hands and soap on their sleeves. Evan chuckled. Not a big laugh, just that awkward low sound he makes when he knows Kaya's crossed a line but won't dare say it. Valerie didn't look at either of them. Her hand kept scrubbing the same plate in circles until the motion felt absurd. The sponge slipped, clattered into the basin. She turned off the faucet. "Excuse me," she said, keeping her tone level. "I need the restroom." She left the kitchen, walked down the hallway she knew by heart, the one she had painted when they first bought this house. The beige trim she'd touched up before the baby shower still looked fresh. Valerie stepped into the guest bathroom, shut the door, and sat on the closed toilet seat. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink for a long while. Her reflection in the mirror was flat, a woman in her 60s who looked older than she had that morning. Her sleeves were wet. Her back ached. She had peeled vegetables, set the table, cleaned the stove after Kaya burned the cranberry glaze. Not once had she sat down, and still, Kaya thought she came here for food, for company, for approval. No. Valerie came because she thought she was wanted. She thought she mattered. She opened her purse on her lap and pulled out her phone. The airline app was still on her home screen. She hadn't used it since the funeral. Valerie tapped and searched for flights. One way, departure tomorrow morning, destination, Phoenix. She confirmed the booking before she even flushed. Back in the hallway, she slipped on her coat. Her keys were already in her hand. She told Evan she wasn't feeling well and that she'd call in the morning. Ka didn't look up. Outside, the cold air snapped at her cheeks. Valerie walked to her car, turned the engine, and watched the porch light dim behind her. She left before sunrise. The house was still dark, quiet, the kind of stillness that used to feel comforting. This time, it felt like vacancy. She didn't leave a note. She didn't leave food in the fridge. She didn't even rinse the last coffee cup, just set it on the counter, still half full. The dish towel on the sink was damp, twisted, the way her hands had left it the night before. At the airport, she didn't check a bag. One carry-on, one coat. She told the airline agent she didn't need a return flight. The woman didn't ask why. As the plane lifted off, Valerie looked out at the frost-covered roofs and wondered how long it would take them to notice she was gone. Would Ka assume she was being dramatic? Would Evan pretend he didn't understand? She had spent years smoothing things over for them, babysitting last minute, driving 3 hours to watch their kids for a weekend emergency, signing a check when they said they were short on the car loan, helping repaint their kitchen cabinets because Ka didn't like the blue even though Valerie had picked it. And still, she was disposable, a convenience. Never once the guest, always the support staff. When Evan bought the house, Valerie sent them a check for $10,000. A gift, she called it. He had hugged her that day, tight, real. She hadn't felt that kind of closeness since he was a teenager. She clung to it for years, like it still meant something, like it still existed beneath the silence. But it didn't. Somewhere between the holidays and hospital visits, Valerie became background noise, useful when needed, forgotten when not. The plane hit light turbulence. The woman next to her gripped her armrest, startled. Valerie didn't flinch. She was used to bumps. By the time they landed in Phoenix, the sun was high, bright enough to make her squint. She didn't feel lighter. Not yet. But she felt distant. And for now, distance was enough. At baggage claim, she sat on a bench and texted one person, her attorney. The folder was still in her bag, zipped between sweaters and shoes. The rental was plain, but it was hers for the month. No clutter, no framed family photos watching her from the walls. No noise except the ceiling fan clicking in time with her breath. Valerie unpacked slowly, one sweater at a time, not because she had many things, but because she didn't know what came next. She had run, but she hadn't planned the landing. At the bottom of her suitcase was the folder. Her husband had called it their peace binder. He had labeled it in bold black ink before his second heart procedure. Just in case, he'd said. He was always the one prepared. Valerie had never wanted to open it without him sitting beside her. She made coffee first. 1 cup, no second mug, no one to ask if they wanted cream. She sat at the dining table and opened the binder like she was unsealing a confession. The first page was their will. Her name, his name, and then Evan's printed neatly in Section 3. Ka had been added later, after the wedding. She remembered the conversation, brief, unemotional. "It's just paperwork," her husband had said. "It keeps things simple." But Valerie remembered how tightly Ka smiled when she signed the witness copy, how quickly she had tucked it into her purse before Valerie even had a chance to reread it. Next came the house deed. Her name alone now. Then the trust documents. There it was again, Evan's name, Kaya's name. The default assumption that family meant automatic inclusion. Her pen hesitated over that clause. Valerie pulled out a yellow highlighter and marked the lines that mentioned successor trustees, beneficiaries, and contingent designations. She didn't make a decision, not yet, but she needed to see clearly. She needed to remind herself who had been written in by love and who had simply been inserted by habit. She closed the folder and sat back in her chair. The coffee had gone lukewarm. She finished it anyway. Outside, a car drove by. No one she knew, no one expecting her. For the first time in years, Valerie was a woman without a task. The next morning, a text came through from Ka. It arrived at 10:17 a.m. "Are you seriously not coming? No hello, no are you okay?" Just that sharp, flat question saturated with annoyance, not worry. Valerie stared at the screen for a long time before locking it without replying. Her phone made a small thud on the table when she set it down. She sipped her coffee slowly and watched the steam drift sideways. Part of her expected a second message, a call, even a follow-up from Evan. Nothing came. Just that one little jab, like she'd inconvenienced Kaya's holiday by removing herself. By noon, Valerie couldn't sit still. She pulled on her coat and walked toward the strip of shops near the rental. It wasn't cold like back home, but she kept her hands in her pockets anyway. She passed 2 cafes, a closed gallery, and a dusty florist before spotting the bookstore. Inside, the air smelled like old paper and forgotten time. She wandered without purpose until her fingers landed on a novel she had meant to read 5 years ago. She bought it without opening the cover. Back on the sidewalk, she didn't head home. She kept walking until she found a small beige building with a notary public sign half hanging from a window. Inside, the receptionist asked if she needed a signature witnessed. "No," Valerie said. "Just a notary seal and a quiet corner." The receptionist pointed her to a side room with a metal table and a pen tethered to a chain. Valerie pulled out the peace binder, flipped to the trust page, and marked a sticky note with 2 words, "Revise order." Then she called her attorney back in Oregon. Her voicemail picked up. "This is Valerie Rusk," she said. "I'm requesting a formal review of my trust documents. Please call me back." She hung up before she could second-guess herself. Back at the rental, Valerie sat with the book in her lap but didn't open it. She stared at the unopened message on her phone. She knew Kaya wasn't waiting for her. She was waiting to feel in control again. Valerie left the phone on silent and went to make another cup of coffee. She hadn't planned to write it all down. It just happened, one bullet point at a time, scratched into the margin of a grocery list she'd started and abandoned on the kitchen counter. She sat down with a fresh sheet of paper and began again. Not because she needed proof, not because she wanted to tally up favors like debt. She just needed to see it, to know she hadn't imagined the imbalance. March 2017, paid Evans emergency rent when Kaya lost her job. June 2018, canceled anniversary cruise to watch kids for 4 days. August 2019, wired $4,000 for car repairs, never repaid. December 2020, sewed handmade costumes for school play, no mention at pickup. April 2021, co-signed on their kitchen remodel, paid final bill when they fell short. January 2022, sent birthday gifts to all 3 kids, no acknowledgement. Valerie paused and looked out the window. The sun hit the stucco walls across the street like they were made of brass. She picked up the pen again. July 2022, babysat during their Hawaii trip. Spent my 65th birthday alone in their living room. No card. Her handwriting stayed steady. That surprised her. There was no tremble, no heat in her chest, just the quiet realization that she had never kept score, but they had never kept memory. She had been consistent, helpful, kind, and in return, she had been tolerated, managed, sometimes ignored, always expected. When her husband passed, Ka sent a 1-line text. "We're thinking of you." That was it. No call, no visit, no flowers. The list grew longer than she expected. Valerie didn't know how much she had given until she laid it out plainly. until she saw the outline of a woman who had been generous to the point of erasure. She folded the page and slipped it into the peace binder behind the trust documents, not because it was legal, but because it was real. Later that night, Valerie walked to the mailbox and sent something small that would speak louder than anything she could say aloud. She mailed it just after noon on January 3rd, a plain padded envelope. No return address, just Kaya's name and their home address printed neatly across the front. Inside, she placed a single redacted copy of the trust document, the page where their names had once been circled in yellow. She blacked out everything else. On the front of the packet, she stuck a small pink note. Under review. No greeting, no explanation, nothing else. Valerie dropped it into the mailbox outside the UPS store, then walked back down the street like she'd just sent a bill. And in some way she had, not for money, but for attention, for understanding, for consequence. By dinner time, the phone rang twice, both calls from Ka. Valerie let them go to voicemail. She didn't check them. She didn't even flinch when the screen lit up a third time. This time, a message. We need to talk. You're overreacting. Overreacting. After everything she had done, after every birthday missed, every holiday half invited, every act of kindness folded into silence. It was that word, overreacting, that made something inside her settle. Valerie wasn't angry. She wasn't broken. She was done. She turned off the ringer and placed the phone face down. Then she poured another cup of coffee and sat on the small patio, watching the sunset drop low over the cactus line. The sky was dusted with color, rose ash, pale gold. It didn't ask anything of her. For once, she didn't feel like she had to be useful to deserve the view. Inside, she lit one candle. Not for a vigil, not for symbolism, just because she liked the smell. She picked up the novel she had bought and read 5 pages without distraction. The phone didn't ring again. The quiet felt earned. Later, she opened the binder and removed the sticky note. She replaced it with a signed instruction for her attorney. Proceed with full amendment. In the morning, she would fax it over. For now, she watched the last of the sun fold into the dark and let the silence speak for her. The message came through at 8:42 a.m. the next day. You could have just said something. No punctuation, no apology, just that tired phrase, like the problem was her failure to speak, not their failure to listen. Valerie stared at it for a while. Then she let the phone go dark in her hand. Evan had always known. He knew the way Ka dismissed Valerie's cooking, rolled her eyes when she told stories, called her sweaters a little much in front of guests. He saw the way Ka turned away when Valerie offered help, how she smiled too tightly when Valerie brought gifts, and he never said a word. The worst part was that Valerie had excused it. She told herself he was caught in the middle, that he didn't want to stir the pot, that he loved them both and was just trying to keep the peace. But peace that requires silence is just surrender in disguise. Valerie remembered the Thanksgiving when Kaya had asked her to bring a pie, then served a store-bought cake instead. Ka slid Valerie's pie into the fridge without a word. Valerie saw Evan watching from across the room. He looked right at her, then looked away. Said nothing. The Christmas Ka made a joke about Valerie's scarves. Maybe the kids can use them for play. Valerie saw his mouth twitch like he might say something, but all that came out was an awkward laugh. That laugh was permission. And when Valerie cleared the table while Kaya sat scrolling her phone, when she folded laundry Ka had left in the dryer, when she offered to help and got brushed off like clutter, he watched every time, and he chose silence. So no, Evan, she didn't just say something. She had said everything, with her hands, her time, her money. And he had heard it. He just never answered. Valerie didn't respond to his message. Instead, she opened the envelope from her attorney that had arrived that morning. Inside, new paperwork, clean and updated. His name was gone, so was hers. That afternoon, Valerie walked to the post office again, this time with 2 letters in hand. The office was tucked between a dentist and a tax service. Nothing grand, just a quiet place with clean carpet and no expectations. The attorney, a woman named Elise, greeted her with calm professionalism. She had kind eyes, but didn't offer small talk. Valerie appreciated that. They reviewed every page slowly. Valerie had already done most of the emotional work in Oregon, but now it was time to make it real across state lines. Elise asked if she wanted to remove them entirely or keep some conditional language in the trust. Valerie shook her head. No ambiguity, she said. Not this time. They rewrote the successor clause first, then the beneficiary list. Evan's name was deleted, so was Ka's. When Elise asked if she had someone else in mind, Valerie knew exactly who. "Lainey Torres," she said, "my goddaughter." Elise nodded, typing quietly. Valerie smiled, remembering the last time she'd heard from Lainey. It was Thanksgiving 2 years ago. No gifts exchanged, no obligations, just a phone call. She had said, "I'm grateful for you, just wanted you to know." Valerie had nearly cried that day and didn't tell anyone. It felt too small to share, but now it felt big enough to honor. They added a section for a small education grant in her husband's name. Nothing extravagant, but enough to help someone thoughtful build something lasting. He would have liked that. He believed in quiet impact. Valerie initialed every revision, every adjustment, and signed the final page without pause. Elise notarized it with a smooth stamp and slid the documents into a clean folder. "You're all set," she said. And Valerie was. She didn't feel angry. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt clean, like she had rinsed out something that had been rotting quietly for years. On the way back to the rental, she stopped at a bakery and bought herself a warm slice of banana bread and a cappuccino. She ate at the counter by the window, people watching. No one knew who she was. No one asked what she was doing. It was the first time in a long time she ate without rushing. She paid in cash and tipped well. That evening, Valerie boxed the original trust documents. The delivery came just after lunch. A medium-sized cardboard box taped twice across the top and labeled in her daughter-in-law's unmistakable handwriting. No return address, just her name. She carried it to this table and sat down in front of it. She didn't open it right away. She made coffee first, as if to give the moment some kind of ceremony. When she finally pulled back the tape, it didn't hiss. It didn't snap. It just gave way, like it had been waiting. Inside, a pie plate, the one with the chipped edge, the one she always used for apple. A framed photo of Evan and her at his college graduation. A baby quilt she had sewn 12 years ago, patchworked from old shirts and lined with satin binding. No note, no message, just returned, written on the shipping label. Valerie sat for a long time and just looked at the items. Not crying, not shaking, just seeing them for what they were now. Artifacts. Things that had once held warmth and meaning and presence, now packed away like clutter. But she didn't take it as an attack. Ka didn't send these to hurt her. She sent them because they meant nothing to her in the first place. And maybe they never had. Valerie picked up this quilt and ran her hand over the stitching. 12 years ago, she'd stayed up late sewing that binding by hand. She had imagined their child curled up in it on cold nights, surrounded by something soft, something made. She folded it gently, placed it in a bag, and walked it to a nearby donation center. The woman at the desk smiled and said, "Are you sure you want to part with this?" "I'm not parting with it," Valerie said. "I'm giving it to someone who might actually see it." Back home, she took the pie plate and slid it into the back of a cabinet. She kept the photo, not for Evan's sake, but because she wanted to remember who she was when that picture was taken, before she let them decide what her love was worth. The porch was still cool when she stepped outside with her mug. Steam curled from the coffee like breath rising slow and quiet into the morning air. No notifications, no missed calls, no half apologies, just the steady hum of life moving forward without the weight of performance. Valerie sat with both hands around the cup and listened. To the birds, to the breeze, to the small sounds that often get drowned out by trying too hard for people who never try back. Then she opened her journal, the same one she'd carried from Oregon. Its pages were worn, now filled with small reckonings and private truths. She turned to the last page and wrote, "I didn't abandon them. I stopped paying to stay." She underlined it once, then closed the cover gently. Later that afternoon, Valerie opened her laptop and typed out one final message to her attorney. "Please add a formal clause. Only active, respectful relationships may be considered for inclusion in the estate. No names, no room for guilt later, just a clear boundary." She hit send. Then she sat back, closed the laptop, and reached for her book, the one she'd been meaning to finish for years. As she read, Valerie didn't feel brave. She didn't feel defiant. She just felt steady, whole, like someone who finally stopped begging to be seen and started living in her own light. She poured a second cup of coffee. This time she stayed outside until it went cold in her hands. She didn't rush to reheat it. She didn't answer the echo of their silence with any of her own. Some absences don't need filling. Valerie had spent so many years earning her place at a table they never intended to share. And now, here on this small porch with a quiet view, she finally understood something she'd been too tired to admit before. The peace wasn't in being accepted. It was in no longer asking. The sun dipped low beyond the cactus ridge, spilling gold into a sky that didn't ask her to perform, to prove, to explain. For the first time in decades, she didn't measure her worth by anyone else's response. Her silence wasn't withdrawal, it was reclamation. Valerie stood, stretched her back, and took one last sip of the cooled coffee. She could taste the faint bitterness of it, but it wasn't unpleasant. It was grounding. Inside, the candle she'd lit earlier had burned low, the wax folding in on itself like soft paper. She watched the flame dance once before she blew it out. The small room filled with the gentle scent of smoke and vanilla. She smiled, not because anything grand had changed, but because she had. The woman who'd once scrubbed plates until her fingers wrinkled had learned that love without respect is just labor disguised as devotion. And she was done laboring for people who only noticed the mess, never the meal. The night grew quiet, the air settling into that particular stillness Phoenix seemed to hold after sunset, an unbothered kind of peace. Valerie stood at the window for a while, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one, each glow soft but certain. When she finally went to bed, she didn't dream of confrontation or apologies. She dreamed of movement, wind through open fields, trains leaving stations, tides pulling outward, everything in motion, everything finally allowed to go.